We can go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on coping with COVID, some strategies for Mid-Atlantic artists. We are so grateful for the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation for sponsoring today's event. A quick reminder, this is being recorded. So for those of you participating live, definitely ask your questions and we'll get to as many of them as possible. And then we will be sharing a recording of this webinar afterwards. If you are new to Zoom, you might notice if you hover towards the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a toolbar. This is where you can mute yourself. We'd ask that all participants keep themselves on mute while participating in today's webinar. If you are having audio issues, you can also switch to phone audio by clicking the arrow next to the microphone, and then there will be dial-in instructions for you. Today's webinar is being, we are offering closed captioning service on the webinar. So if you'd like to make use of that, please follow this link. It is here on the screen, and it also is in the chat, and you can follow along. Note that you might need to adjust your window so that you can see the closed captions and the Zoom materials. We welcome you to leave your video on. If you would like to participate that way, you're also welcome to turn your video off. You do that by hovering towards the bottom of that Zoom window again and stopping or starting your video accordingly. And lastly, we'd like you to direct your attention to the chat box. You may have seen I posted a welcome message, so it could be flashing in orange on your screen. This chat window is where we will be taking questions throughout the webinar. So we welcome you to put your questions here if you were not able to submit them in advance, or if you think of something you just want to make sure we touch on as we're going through today's information. So again, today is Coping with COVID, Strategies for Mid-Atlantic Artists. And I would love to welcome Kimberly from the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation to share a few words with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kimberly Steinley-Super, and I'm a program officer here at Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, working primarily with individual artists. And some of you may know me through the Individual Artist Fellowships program. We know that this is a time of uncertainty for many, and the burden on individual artists can be particularly heavy. So while we work to offer as much flexibility as possible with grantees and applicants, we are also striving to provide additional information on resources and opportunities to the field. We hope that you can take away something from today's webinar that will prove useful to you and offer some direction moving forward. Please also be sure to visit our COVID-19 resource page at our website, midatlanticarts.org, for funding support specific to individual artists across all disciplines. And new opportunities, as new opportunities become available, they are actively added to that page, and we are sharing this through social media as well. So please check in often and follow up with us on Facebook and Twitter. Finally, I just want to reiterate my thanks and appreciation to all of you as artists. As we are all binge watching our favorite shows or listening to our favorite songs, sinking into a good book, or seeking out new forms of creative expression, I think it's worth taking a minute to recognize that it is all of you who we are turning to for comfort, motivation, and release. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to Elaine, who will be leading today's webinar. So thank you so much, Elaine, for sharing this information.
Thank you, Kimberly. And I will echo the appreciation for all the creators in the world who are making this a little bit more bearable. As Kimberly mentioned, my name is Elaine Grogan-Luttrell. I am a CPA with a personal financial specialist and an accredited financial counselor. And I am the luckiest CPA ever because I am able to work with creative groups all around the country, providing support to creative organizations and individuals to help with the business and financial side of creativity. And lately, that has meant a whole lot of talk around PPP applications and unemployment processes in various states. Today's webinar is being provided for educational purposes only. Although I am a CPA, this is not intended to be tax, legal, or accounting advice. It's also worth noting that this information is changing rapidly and in real time. So it's up to date as of today, but things are moving very, very quickly as more clarity is being released and additional guidance is being released. So what I thought we would do today is talk about some resources available specifically to individual artists. Most specifically, we want to talk about unemployment assistance in the region covered by the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation. That includes the 9 state and territory region in the Mid-Atlantic area of the United States. We'll also talk about some emergency assistance opportunities that are available to individual artists. And then we'll end with some practical next steps that you can think about as you move forward and figure out how you're going to adjust and cope with the situation right now. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to the recording afterwards if you registered. And you will also be receiving a link to the PDF of these slides. We are covering a lot of information and we will probably go through it kind of quickly because we only have an hour. So don't feel rushed, even if we're going through the information rather quickly. You will have access to ask additional questions and also see this information in your inbox later today. So let's talk about unemployment. In normal circumstances, unemployment is governed at the state level, and in general, there is a 1-week waiting period between when you become eligible for unemployment and when you may start collecting it. There is also a requirement that you must be actively looking for work, and unemployment benefits generally extend for 26 weeks. Depending on what state you live in, your unemployment benefit replaces between 45 and about 66% of your employment or your income before you became unemployed. And different states govern this differently and define the base earnings on which that percentage is based differently. It's also worth noting that unemployment is taxable income to you, which means if you do collect unemployment this year, at the end of the year, you'll receive a 1099 from your state or territory reporting that as income to you. Now, we also know that the general rules still apply, but there are some changes and nuances thanks to legislation called the CARES Act that was passed a number of weeks ago. One of the main provision of the CARES Act is that it includes this new program called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And this program, again, is being governed at the state level, but it does enable additional individuals who would not normally be eligible for unemployment to claim unemployment. This includes self-employed individuals, contractors, freelancers, gig workers, lots and lots of individual creatives are now eligible for this expanded unemployment program. The second program that was introduced is the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation piece. This is the piece that includes $600 of additional unemployment above and beyond what you would normally be eligible for. And this is being viewed as something that's very helpful to individuals because it's providing some additional support right now when many individuals need it. The third part of the program is Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And this piece of the program extends unemployment from the normal 26-week period to a 39-week period. That means you have 13 additional weeks to apply and to claim unemployment. So essentially what this does is, under the CARES Act, unemployment covers more people, it gives away more money, and it lasts longer, all of which is very, very good and helpful for individuals. But it is still governed at the state level, which means each state is left up to individually figure out how it's going to award these additional dollars and comply with the requirements at the federal level. And we're seeing states approach this in a number of different ways. So what we're seeing in general is that 1 week waiting period that would apply under normal unemployment is mostly being waived. In general, if you become unemployed or become unable to work as a result of COVID-19, then your unemployment eligibility begins the day after that. You do not have to wait a 1 week period before filing. The requirement that you be actively looking for work has also been mostly waived. Governors and secretaries of states and labor have taken different actions to ensure that their citizens know they do not have to be actively looking for work during this time. Also, many states have automatically extended the benefits to last for 39 weeks instead of 26, but this is not universal. In some states, you do need to reapply after your initial 26 weeks of unemployment runs out. Also, that additional $600 per week is generally being included automatically in most states, which is really helpful. I have not seen a state yet that requires individuals to apply for that separately, although in some states, individuals are receiving that as a separate payment. So you might get your regular unemployment benefit and then a separate $600 benefit for the period while that lasts. Also, we're seeing that just like under regular unemployment, individuals who are filing under pandemic unemployment assistance or are newly part of the system do need to recertify their eligibility for unemployment on a weekly basis. This is to ensure that you can continue to receive your benefits. And in most states, this is happening on their websites, although states are allowing you to call in to recertify as well. So those are some of the general changes we're seeing. And I thought it would be helpful here to address some of the questions that I've heard a lot from creative individuals, many of whom are participating in the unemployment system for the first time. So the first question tends to be, what are my base earnings? Unemployment benefits, of course, are based on this idea of your base earning amount. And so it's useful to understand how that is defined in your state. Many states or territories define that as a 12-month period. And in most places, if you are applying for unemployment right now, the base period covered is calendar year 2019. So you would be looking at earnings you had from January through December of 2019. That's not universal, but that's how a number of states are handling it. Then we translate your base earnings amount into a weekly amount, and that is generally how we calculate the unemployment insurance amount you might be eligible for. And as I mentioned, states calculate that differently. Some states offer 50% of your base earnings per week. Other states offer up to 60 or 66% of that. My advice here would be to look for guidance from your state or territory's unemployment office on how they define base earnings in general, because that calculation is still going to apply even if you're applying for pandemic unemployment assistance instead of regular unemployment. So see if you can figure out how your state defines base earnings, and that'll be a good way to help you estimate and approximate what your base earnings would be. The second question that's coming up pretty regularly for individuals is, how can you prove that you were self-employed, and how can you prove this base earnings amount? Different states have answered this in different ways. What we generally see, though, is that providing your tax return from 2019 seems to be the most popular way or the most common way of sharing your base earnings during that period. So if you were an individual artist and you filed a Schedule C, and maybe you reported sales of work, or maybe you reported different type of contract work or 1099 work you did on your Schedule C, that tends to be the most common way of showing your self-employment income from the covered period. Some states are also accepting bank statements, any ledgers you may have had. So if you have a system where you track your income and expenses for your business, perhaps through QuickBooks or some other system, that could be a good way to show your base earnings. Other states are encouraging you to submit 1099s or other documentation that supports the amount that you earned during that base period. So again, check with your exact state to see if they have specified exactly what they want you to submit. And if not, gather up your tax return and then your other sort of key financial documents for your business and be ready to submit that either as part of your application or in response to any questions that your state or territory might ask. The next most common question that seems to be coming up is whether someone can be partially unemployed and still eligible for benefits. And the answer is, in general, yes. Most states allow you to be partially unemployed and still claim unemployment benefits, especially now. But you do need to pay attention to the limits in your particular state. The state of Virginia, for example, allows you to earn up to your unemployment amount plus $50 before losing your unemployment benefits. Other states reduce your unemployment benefits for any earnings you have during the week. As part of this recertification process, once you are approved and then you have to report weekly that you are still eligible for unemployment, that's when you would report any earnings you had during the week. So perhaps you sold a piece of work, or maybe you are a musician and you're teaching lessons out of your home and some students paid you virtually, right? That sort of earnings you would go ahead and report as part of your recertification process. And then the state may adjust your unemployment benefits depending on how much you earned in a given week. As self-employed individuals, we know that sometimes our work happens in a lot of different places. And especially in this area, individuals may find themselves working in one state and living in another. So the question has come up, where should I be applying for unemployment benefits? If you had a W-2 job, so a job where you were an employee of someone else and you were laid off, that means you would fall under kind of normal unemployment insurance. And so you would want to go ahead and apply for unemployment insurance in that state or territory where you worked, because that's where your benefits would have likely been paid. If, however, you are applying for pandemic unemployment assistance based on your self-employment income, you want to start by applying in your home state. So the state where you live or where your business is based. That is probably going to be your best bet. You may receive additional guidance from the state that encourages you to apply somewhere else, but that would be sort of part of a follow-up conversation. The general rule, especially if you are self-employed, is to apply in the state where your business is based. And lastly, I think it's important to acknowledge that as you're going through these systems, these questions were not designed for a global pandemic, and they were not designed to address self-employed individuals. And so what's really interesting about this is the sort of tension between feeling like you're being directed to answer questions in a particular way, but then also feeling like you need to certify that you've answered all the questions accurately. We'll see an example of this when we dive a little bit deeper into the New Jersey state guidelines. In New Jersey, for example, there is specific guidance that has been issued from the state that says, answer yes to the question, are you actively looking for work? Even if you're not, because of the global pandemic. And so for some individuals, they see the guidance and they understand that that's the way they need to answer that question, but it still feels perhaps not totally honest. And so my advice would be, definitely look for guidance from your state or territory, because many of them are providing specific information about ways you need to answer questions that were not necessarily designed for you or for this moment. And then I would go ahead and maybe keep a copy of that guidance, whether that is downloading it from the website or taking a screen capture of it and saving that image, just so that you have a record of why you made the choices you made. And then do your best, because absolutely everyone is navigating these systems and kind of these uncharted territories. So do your best, try to be as honest as possible, and definitely look for guidance for specific questions from your state. So now we get to dive a little bit deeper into the states and territories covered by the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation. And we'll start with DC. We're going through these in alphabetical order. If you live in DC, this is what your unemployment insurance website looks like. The link is there at the bottom. And as a quick reminder, you will be receiving a copy of this slide deck afterwards. So definitely don't feel like you have to write down every link perfectly. In DC, they have shared that they have had almost 82,000 claims for unemployment that have been filed through April 21st. And as of Friday, April 24th, this past Friday, individuals could begin filing for pandemic unemployment assistance. Remember, that's that expanded eligibility, right? Your eligibility in DC is based on your income over the past 18 months, and they will ask for wage verification information, but it's not totally clear what that's going to be yet. My suggestion would be get a copy of your tax return, keep that handy from 2019, because that's going to be a good source of documentation. In DC, you are still eligible for unemployment, even if you are not totally unemployed. That is, if your earnings have been reduced because of COVID, or possibly substantially reduced, but you may occasionally sell some work or something like that. As you are part of the system, just make sure you are reporting your wages every week so that the benefits can be adjusted. In DC, you do not have to be actively looking for work, but be careful because the question is still on the form, but know that that requirement has been suspended in DC. Similarly, the waiting period has been suspended in DC, and the extra $600 payment will be automatically included in your unemployment payment for the weeks that you are eligible. The additional 13-week extended unemployment period will still apply. And recently, effectively last week, at the very end of last week, I think, DC announced a small business micro grant program that could be an option to provide additional assistance if your business is based in DC. DC is providing these situational updates on a fairly regular basis. The microgrant program was in the update provided today. So if you live or work in DC, this is a handy resource to bookmark and check back with pretty regularly. If you live in Delaware, this is what your division of unemployment insurance looks like for your state. And Delaware has suggested that you email the state rather than calling them if you have questions about unemployment. They also highly suggest that you include your confirmation number in that correspondence. Unemployment for self-employed individuals is not yet incorporated into Delaware's system, but they are working on it. They expect it will go live sometime in early or mid-May. That's certainly what they're hoping for. But again, Delaware, like many other states, are building parallel unemployment systems to address this expanded eligibility. And so it's taking some time for them to get fully online with these systems. Delaware has invited you to text UI Facts to 555-888 if you would like to receive regular updates or a link to their frequently asked questions. As you are getting prepared to file in Delaware, it's not a bad idea to start gathering your documentation. Delaware suggests you have your driver's license, last year's tax return, your Delaware business license number, and your banking information handy. You'll need that as you apply for unemployment. And the maximum weekly amount in Delaware is $400. Even if you are not totally unemployed, you are likely still eligible in Delaware. And again, just like in DC and other states and territories, you'll want to just report any earnings you have on a weekly basis. You do not have to be actively looking for work in Delaware. And an interesting thing about Delaware is if you do not have access to email these forms or submit them online, Delaware is still accepting paper applications in secure drop boxes outside of each location of the Division of Unemployment. You can also send them in by mail. So Delaware is trying to make the program as accessible for as many people as possible. If you live in Maryland, your Department of Labor governs unemployment, and that's what this website looks like. There is no waiting period in Maryland. Eligibility begins the day after your unemployment starts, and you do not have to be actively looking for work in Maryland. If you are preparing to file, you would want to file online, and you would file for 1 week at a time. And Maryland is encouraging you to file on specific days that correspond with the first letter of your last name. So if your last name begins with A through F, they're encouraging you to use the website on Mondays. If your last name begins with G through N, you use it on Tuesdays, and so on. This is helping with some of the overwhelming traffic that's coming to the website in Maryland. Self-employed individuals were able to start filing last Friday in Maryland, but as you can imagine, the system was very quickly overloaded. So earlier this week, Maryland sent out a really lovely apology acknowledging some of the challenges that they faced in launching the system online and encouraging people to be patient. They've converted the system to a virtual waiting line while the system is being updated, and they're doing work on it from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. every morning. So definitely the system is there, it is getting there, but be patient because it is regularly being overwhelmed and overloaded. Only weekly filers can use the system on Sundays and Mondays in Maryland, and they are encouraging you, if you are applying for pandemic unemployment assistance, that's that expanded program, that new claims will only happen Tuesdays through Saturdays, and individuals who are filing their weekly certifications will be using the system on Sundays and Mondays. So pay attention to the guidance that's coming out. It is changing pretty regularly as states are navigating with the amount of volume and traffic that this current situation is bringing to their unemployment pages. The unemployment benefit ranges in Maryland from $50 to $430 per week, calculated on base earnings. And base earnings are how much you earned, ready for these terms of art, in the first 4 of the last 5 calendar quarters. And what that essentially means is that in Maryland, as in many other jurisdictions, if you are applying right now, we are in the 2nd calendar quarter of 2020, they are looking at the time period from January through December of 2019. So yes, you do need to recertify on a weekly basis. You are eligible to still earn some income and collect unemployment in Maryland. The extra $600 will be part of your claim, and the additional expanded time period will still apply. If you live in New Jersey, this is what your website looks like. And what's interesting about New Jersey's website is if you visit the Department of Labor and Workforce Development and hang out there for a moment, there will be a pop-up that comes that directs you to some COVID resources, and specifically that pandemic unemployment assistance program, which is very useful. What's interesting about New Jersey is that in New Jersey, you need to apply for unemployment first, regular old unemployment. New Jersey is working with its Department of Labor to build out a pandemic unemployment assistance system, and it will be ready at some point, but it's going to take some time. You do, however, need an account through the regular unemployment office, which is why New Jersey is suggesting that you go ahead and apply for regular unemployment first. The New Jersey benefit is 60% of your weekly wages, and the maximum is $713 per week. The minimum amount is $213 per week. And in New Jersey's guidance, they shared that even if your business was operating at a loss in 2019, so let's say your Schedule C had a negative net income amount, even if that was the case, you would still be eligible for the minimum weekly amount in New Jersey. I have not seen that guidance from other states yet, but I thought it was really helpful guidance that the state of New Jersey provided. New Jersey has also clarified that self-employed wages are calculated for purposes of pandemic unemployment assistance in New Jersey using last year's tax return. And again, that is probably going to be your Schedule C. New Jersey also suggested that you have 2 years worth of tax return data handy just in case you need it. Your additional $600 will be automatically added to your weekly benefit for the weeks when it applies. And if you are someone who is waiting to hear back from the state, New Jersey is asking you to be patient. If you have received a confirmation number, you are in there, just be patient. There's a lot going on, and all of these individuals are working remotely like others, so be patient. They also shared that if you were rejected and you think it's a mistake, you may want to apply again, right? So maybe you are someone who very early on in this process heard that the CARES Act was expanding eligibility for unemployment and you applied right away. You would probably have been rejected because the system wasn't ready to receive those applications yet. So New Jersey is encouraging you to apply again because you may have been rejected by mistake. I will say though, New Jersey is going to be sharing even more information about their pandemic unemployment assistance program. So if you maybe want to give it another week just to see if additional guidance comes out or if the system goes fully online, you can certainly wait. Unemployment benefits are retroactive to the day you became eligible, so you don't need to apply right away in order to get your benefits from the first day, right? So they will be retroactive. New Jersey has a fantastic application guide they published. It's on their website, and I love it because it shows you images of what the screens look like as you go through the unemployment process in New Jersey, and it shows you how they suggest you answer particular questions that may not have been designed for you. So I would strongly suggest that you download this application guide, read through it, and make sure you're ready before you begin the application process in New Jersey. And by the way, that advice is true no matter where you're filing. Definitely read through all the frequently asked questions and get your hands on any guides or assistance ahead of time so that you're prepared to go through the process. And in New Jersey, it's worth noting, you cannot save the application and return to it later. So definitely make sure you are completing the full application when you are in there. In New Jersey, like in all other states and territories that we've seen, you do have to recertify every week to confirm that you are eligible for unemployment. And in New Jersey, this week they introduced a recertification date, and you recertify on a day of the week that corresponds to the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. This schedule was released on Monday, and again, it's meant to help with the traffic flow going to the unemployment website in New Jersey. This is the example I alluded to earlier. In New Jersey, you do not have to be actively seeking work to be eligible for unemployment. And New Jersey shared in a very specific response to a frequently asked question, if you are waiting to be recalled to your present job or delaying your job search until this natural emergency ends or subsides, you should answer yes to the question, were you actively seeking work? And again, as you're going through this, that feels like it might be a weird thing to adhere to, or it feels like it might be not totally true. But if you're relying on guidance from the state, save a copy of it, save a screenshot of the guidance so that you can remember why you answered in the way you answered. And of course, the additional 13 weeks applies in New Jersey as well. New York's unemployment website through the Department of Labor looks like this, and New York has shared a graphic, which might be familiar. We've seen this for a handful of other states. It's sort of a visual representation of how you would go through the process in New York and which program you might be eligible for. So in New York, there is only one application that covers both regular unemployment insurance and pandemic unemployment assistance. So what's really nice in New York is there's just one place. You do not have to worry about applying for a separate program if you are self-employed. You file a new claim at my.ny.gov, or if you are already in the system, you can visit this website to update your information. As is in other places, New York is managing the traffic flow to its website by encouraging people to visit and make use of the services on certain days. New York's benefits are based on the high quarter wage from the base period divided by 26. This gets to a percentage of your weekly wage amount, and the maximum weekly benefit in New York is $504. Your base earnings are how much you earned in the first 4 of the last 5 calendar quarters, as we've seen in other states. And so if you're applying right now, the 4 quarters they would be looking at to identify your highest earning quarter would be January through December of 2019. You do have to certify that you are eligible for benefits every week, and you can still get partial benefits in New York if you earned less than $504 during the week. You'll note that states generally are still providing partial benefits, but each state and territory defines how they're calculating the partial benefits that you're eligible for a little bit differently. The additional $600 should be automatically included, and your unemployment would be backdated. Like New Jersey, New York has a guide published for self-employed individuals. And again, this walks you through with images of the application process and gives you information about what you would want to include in your application. It is incredibly helpful, and it wouldn't surprise me if additional states start to publish similar types of application guides because they are so helpful, especially in New York and New Jersey. In Pennsylvania, this is what your website looks like. There is wonderful information here. It's part of the Office of Unemployment Compensation. And similar to New York and Texas and a handful of other states, there's a visual representation of which programs you might be eligible for and how you would go about applying for them. What's interesting about Pennsylvania is that you may not file for regular unemployment in Pennsylvania. They want you to only file for pandemic unemployment assistance. So don't file for regular unemployment, file for this special PUA program that was initiated to expand unemployment to self-employed individuals. And this is important because, as you'll see, different states are handling it differently. So in New York, you go to one place and you apply for either program. Pennsylvania is very different. You may have applied for regular unemployment before pandemic unemployment assistance was available. And so you may have gotten a message that you are ineligible when you applied for PUA. Go ahead and reapply. Pennsylvania shared some guidance earlier this week that some individuals were receiving messages that they were ineligible in error. They believe they've fixed that so far. So if you are someone who has gone through the PUA application process in Pennsylvania and you were deemed ineligible, it may have just been a glitch. So go ahead and reapply. You'll get about half of your weekly earnings through unemployment in Pennsylvania. And if you have dependents, the amount would go up a bit more. And the benefit range is between $195 and $572 per week. Proving self-employment in Pennsylvania can be done using invoices or bank statements, tax returns you had from last year, 1099s, all of that good stuff can be used as the documentation to support your self-employment earnings. As in other places, you do not have to be actively looking for work, nor do you have to wait a week before applying. If you are not totally unemployed, perhaps again, you're selling a little bit here and there or receiving a bit of income, you may still qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance, and the additional $600 should be automatically included in your weekly payments. If you live in the U.S. Virgin Islands, this is what your website looks like. You file through the unemployment insurance portal. It's vidol.gov, and your base year is 4 out of 5 previous quarters, as we've seen. The weekly minimum for unemployment in the Virgin Islands is $33, and you do not have to be actively looking for work. Because also there's a state of health emergency, you do not have to wait a week to be eligible either. If your hours have been reduced, the unemployment office in the Virgin Islands suggests that you send a letter to them documenting how your hours were reduced, and the additional $600 payment should be automatically included. In Virginia, this is what your website looks like, and you've probably started noticing there are a lot of COVID alerts and additional banners and additional information showing up at the top of these websites. Those are great resources to follow and kind of navigate through, because very often these offices are directing you to the most frequently asked questions through these links. Virginia is kind of interesting because they want you to apply for unemployment insurance first, and then they say count on being rejected, because you need to be rejected from regular unemployment before you apply for pandemic unemployment assistance. And you do need to do both in the state of Virginia. The application for pandemic unemployment assistance is live, so they're encouraging you to apply if you are eligible. And so far, Virginia has not specified that they require additional documentation. However, after you submit your application, it is very likely that they will respond and ask for additional documentation at that point. So I would encourage you to have your tax returns handy, plus any other information showing your earnings, particularly from last year. You do need to recertify every week, and your unemployment is up to $378 per week based on your earnings over the past year and a half. You may still be eligible for benefits even if you are partially employed, and the additional $600 should be automatically added to your payment in Virginia. If you live in West Virginia, this is your website, and they have also shared a visual representation of the benefits you are eligible for. And I'll draw your attention to the blue box on the right. It says apply for pandemic unemployment assistance, and then there's text on a diagonal that says this program is coming soon. It is not yet live in West Virginia, but they are working on it. If you are filing for regular unemployment, that is live. You can visit uc.workforcewv.org. They will also note that this site is not necessarily compatible with mobile phones. They definitely suggest that you use a computer to access this website. Self-employment, again, is not built into their system yet. They are working on it, and you will be applying for PUA, or Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, separately from regular unemployment in West Virginia. They are encouraging you to prove your self-employment using 1099s, bank statements, leases, advertisements, any of that type of information. And then they are also suggesting that you have tax returns or ledgers showing your income and expenses, or bank statements available to prove wages for your base period. So this is kind of interesting in West Virginia, that they are asking you to basically substantiate the fact that first, you were self-employed, and you can do that by showing 1099s, bank statements, advertisements, business lease, all sorts of things. But then secondly, they're asking you to substantiate the amount of earnings you had from self-employment. So there's sort of a two-step verification process in West Virginia that we haven't necessarily seen in other states. You do need to recertify weekly in West Virginia, and you can do that on the website or by phone. Your wages during the 12-month base period is going to determine how much you are eligible for every week. So West Virginia will review the information you submit and then provide a money determination letter to you. Again, we expect this program to run similarly once the self-employment piece goes online. So you would provide the information and then receive your money determination letter. If you do still have some earnings, you may still be eligible, but your benefit will be lower. You do not have to wait a week, and you do not have to be actively looking for work in West Virginia. Although it's worth noting, you will be automatically enrolled in the job site search in West Virginia. So you will be automatically enrolled in that. It may not be applicable to you, but you will automatically be enrolled. You'll get your additional $600 automatically, and the additional 13 weeks will apply in West Virginia. And it's also worth noting that West Virginia has a really wonderful frequently asked questions site that addresses a lot of the PUA and self-employment questions related to unemployment insurance. So the link to that is workforcewv.org/CARES Act questions. So that is worth viewing if you live in West Virginia. That's a lot of detail for a lot of different states and territories. And so I thought it would be helpful to kind of pull out some of the key observations. In general, most people are seeing one of three options when it comes to applying for unemployment. Some states have combined regular unemployment insurance with this expanded eligibility. So there's one system and you apply once. New York is a great example of that. Other states have two separate systems, and some states require you to be rejected from regular unemployment before you can apply for pandemic unemployment assistance. Virginia is an example of this. Other states keep the system separate, and they want you to apply for only one or the other. Pennsylvania is an example of this. So they do not want you applying for regular unemployment if you qualify under that expanded eligibility in Pennsylvania. It's also worth noting that most states or territories have published some sort of handbook or guide that covers general unemployment in those states or territories. And my suggestion would be definitely get your hands on that document. Mostly they are available as PDF files, and they tend to be 30 or 40 pages long, but they go through in detail how the unemployment process works in your state or territory. And even though it is for normal unemployment, as opposed to this expanded unemployment world that we're living in right now, there's still a lot of useful information in there, especially when it comes to calculating the amount that you would normally be eligible eligible for. So figuring out what your base earnings are or different ways of substantiating that amount. There's also useful information about the weekly recertification process, as well as details about how much you can earn before you start losing your benefits in those particular states. Most states and territories have published a list of frequently asked questions. I will say they are not always easy to find. I really love the states who make them prominent and easy to find, especially if they're clearly linked or there's some sort of pop-up that directs you to the right place. But if there's not that in your state or territory, it's probably still there. It's just buried on the website somewhere. So doing a search for COVID or CARES or even PUA will often get you to a frequently asked question list that is being updated pretty regularly. 2 states have published application guides, New York and New Jersey. These are fantastic. So if you live in those states, enjoy the application guide. It's very detailed and very helpful. I would hope many states will follow suit and publish similar versions of those application guides. And I'd also encourage you to watch for regular updates from your states. We've seen a couple of options where you can opt in for text message notifications or email alerts from the offices of unemployment. I'd encourage you to sign up for those if that makes sense for you, just so you are getting the most up-to-date information from your state or territory. I will pause now before we move into talking about other emergency assistance, because that is a lot of information about unemployment I have just shared with you. So if you do have questions, I'd encourage you to put them in the chat. I haven't seen any come through so far, but I will definitely pay attention and address them as we keep going. Here's a question from Heidi. Heidi, you tour and do work in multiple states. Do you have any information regarding how states are handling this? That's a great question, Heidi. If you are an employee of someone in a different state, you would want to apply for unemployment insurance in the state where you are the employee, right? So if you are a musician that's part of a union and you're treated as an employee in different states, then you would want to apply in the state where you're treated as an employee. But if you're a musician that runs your own band or chamber group and you are generally paid as an independent contractor, so you're part of that self-employed group, then you would want to apply for that expanded pandemic unemployment assistance program in your home state, right? So because you haven't had unemployment being withheld or paid in any other places, you would want to focus your application in your home state. I have heard anecdotally that some people are being rejected and told to apply somewhere else. If that's the case, if that's the message you get back from your state, I think we can sort of work through that. But the general guidance is, especially if you are self-employed, apply in your home state where you live and where the business is primarily based, even if you earned money in other places. Great question. Thanks, Heidi, for that. I'm not seeing additional questions in the chat, so I'm going to keep talking, but by all means, if you do have questions, put them in there and I will address them certainly at the end if there's time, and then I'll follow up via email if there's not additional time to go through all the questions. So that was unemployment. I also wanted to make sure we touched on some other emergency assistance that is available. Many of you have probably started receiving your stimulus checks. These are coming out through the IRS tax system, and the amount is $1,200 per person. $2,400 per couple if you are filing jointly in the United States. You will not get the full amount if your adjusted gross income is above $75,000 or $150,000 for those filers who file jointly. And many people have already started getting their direct deposits, which is great news. I will also encourage you, if you have not received your deposit yet and you are expecting it, the IRS has set up a way for you to kind of see what's going on or to check the status of your stimulus payment. It's on the IRS's website. It's irs.gov/coronavirus/getmypayment. And so what I've seen and been told is that many people are seeing a status that says not available, or sometimes it's saying pending. And I'd encourage you, if that's the case, checking back, keep revisiting on a regular basis. There was a musician I was working with last week whose status kept saying not available, not available. And finally, at the end of last week, her status was changed to need more information, and she was able to follow a link and confirm her banking information. So I know it's frustrating because people are very anxious to be receiving these deposits. So if you're waiting for it, double check to see if the IRS does still need additional information of you. The other program I'd like to address is the Paycheck Protection Program that's running through the Small Business Administration. These are loans that small businesses, those with fewer than 500 employees, may apply for, and the loan is forgivable as long as you use it to maintain salaries, rent, and utilities for your business. And 75% of the loan amount has to be used to maintain payroll at comparable levels to where people were before the pandemic happened. If this is something that is appealing to you because a forgivable loan that will cover an 8-week period feels pretty good, it is a great option. Your job is to find an eligible SBA lender. Most groups and individuals I've been working with have been having the best luck with credit unions and regional or local financial institutions as opposed to major national financial institutions. And so if you visit the SBA's website, there's a tool where you can enter your zip code and identify eligible lenders in your area. So if you already have a relationship with a financial institution and you want to go through them, that's fantastic. If you want to identify maybe a different financial institution, that's an option as well. You may have heard that the first round of this PPP program ran out of money very quickly. A second round of funding was approved, effective, I think that law was signed on Friday, and then the funding became available on Monday. So the PPP program reopened, but it was completely overwhelmed. I think I read an article that said only 7 loans were processed that day, which is kind of insane. There was a huge lag from individuals who were still in the queue from the first round of funding. There were also some technical glitches with the website, and there were a lot of problems submitting applications just because the system was pretty overwhelmed and overloaded. So if PPP is something you're thinking about, definitely get everything ready, get in line, make sure you are sharing what you need with your financial institution so that they can submit the application on your behalf. And it is also worth noting that these loans will not be automatically forgiven. After you receive the loan, it can qualify for loan forgiveness, but you will probably have to show that you paid the amount for salaries or payroll and rent and utilities in keeping with the intention of the program. So if you do receive PPP money, just file away that in about 8 weeks or so, you're going to have to apply for loan forgiveness. So don't forget to do that. The PPP application I have a screen grab of it here. It's pretty straightforward. It's only a couple of pages, and the instructions are included in this PDF document. The piece that keeps sort of tripping up individuals that might be eligible for this is this section I've circled here on the screen where it asks for the average monthly payroll. And for individuals, especially in the arts, you don't have an average monthly payroll. But luckily, the SBA issued some guidance in what it called its interim final rule. And that guidance said, if you are self-employed, the number you should put here is the number from your Schedule C, line 31. So it's that net income from 2019. And you divide that number by 12. That's how you get to your average monthly payroll amount, which is how you would complete this form. So if you are going through the process, I found the interim final rule from the SBA to be incredibly helpful. That's a great resource as you're going through this. But no, it is technical guidance and it's kind of tough to read. So be patient with yourself, seek out some help, particularly from your financial institution, and good luck getting in line. as you are getting in line and thinking about all the different ways to support and sustain yourself during this time, I think it's useful to take a moment to remember that you are part of a community here. You are part of a community of creators. You are part of a community that thrives because the arts are part of it. This is reflecting the cultural areas or divisions where you live and work, the community foundations that might support you, and your customers and your clients. And you're also part of a business community. You probably have a relationship with a financial institution. You probably have access to small business support through your SBA or an SBDC, great resources for information. And you also interact with other companies on a fairly regular basis. You probably have social media accounts. Maybe you work with Intuit because you use QuickBooks. Maybe you use PayPal or Square. All of these other companies have been extending support to the companies that are part of their community. So I'd encourage you to remember and file away that you are part of a community, a creative community, a client community, and a business community, and you can make use of the resources in those areas as you're navigating these challenges. And of course, you are part of your state or territory, which means there are state and local governmental groups, particularly at the city level, that are supporting individual artists. There are community foundations, as I mentioned, and you have access to unemployment assistance as part of the expanded eligibility. And of course, the small business support coming through the SBA applies to you as well, because you are a small business owner. So what should you really be doing as we go through all of this? Take a breath, right? Know that this webinar has been recorded. You will receive a link to the recording afterwards, and you will also receive a copy of these slides. So we've gone through a lot of information. Take your time, process it at your own pace, and know that you can review it at your leisure. And then remember that you're part of a community that exists to support you. You're surrounded by businesses and individuals and funders and advocates for you, and it's okay to make use of that support. Get to know and love your state's unemployment office and their website, plus other opportunities for support, whether that is through the SBA's PPP program or through an application for community foundations or emergency relief grants that are being offered to individuals or others. Know that you are part of this system and you have access to these resources. The other advice I have been strongly suggesting is for people to do the math to keep planning for various short and long-term scenarios. I think many people are acknowledging that the recovery from this will not be immediate and it may take some time. So as I'm working with organizations and individuals, we are planning out what a budget might look like if there are several more months of limited earning potential, or if you are someone who relies on grant funding or other types of support, it's worth thinking about what the longer term implications of that support might be so that you can start preparing for it. It can be really scary to start doing the math around some of those numbers that feel very intimidating and very daunting. But what I will say and what I have observed is that individual creatives are so much better at budgeting than more analytically trained linear thinkers, because you're able to see something and then see the potential ways to solve a problem as opposed to feeling constrained by it. So even if it is terrifying to look at what your budget might look like for the rest of this year and even into 2021, my guess is, and my observation has been, you will feel better if you start doing the math and making plans. And then lastly, take a deep breath. It is going to be okay. Keep making amazing work. Keep supporting your community. Keep accepting the support that your community is extending to you. And if you have additional questions, definitely reach out. We went through unemployment assistance in general, and then also some specific nuances about unemployment right now, including diving into each state specifically. We talked briefly about different emergency assistance opportunities, and then covered a few practical next steps. If you have additional questions, you may certainly reach out. Stay tuned for the recording and for a copy of the slides, and all the best with your creative pursuits. Thanks for joining us today.